What's going on, and welcome to the NBA DFS Q&A show. My name is Tom Vecchio. I'll be here for the next 30 minutes taking your questions about tonight's 5-game NBA slate. Obviously, there's a ton of information, injury news, players in and out of the league's COVID protocol that we have a lot of value, and there's not a whole lot of top-tier options on tonight's slate. I think that this should make roster construction pretty interesting tonight because we have a few very clear options we want to be targeting, and then there's just a number of different value options. We have a lot to get through. I think we're in an okay spot. There's obviously some players we're waiting on when it comes to their injury information, but the games themselves I think are looking pretty good. Starting off, we have Grim on YouTube is saying Onyeka Okongwu or Enes Freedom. That is the center position. We're obviously looking for a bit of value because Clint Capella is ruled out for Atlanta, and just the Boston's pretty strong, but we still should be seeing some minutes for Enes Kanter Freedom. I like Okongwu at $4,000. We know he's going to be on a minutes restriction. I just like the matchup overall going up against the Magic, who we know are shorthanded, and the Magic are one of the worst defensive teams this season against centers, allowing the fifth most FanDuel points per game opposing center. So we're going to see them. We're going to see Onyeka Okongwu on another minutes limit. Hopefully, it's more than 13. I'm expecting around 15 to 18 for him tonight. And I'll be looking there ahead of Kanter, or I should say Freedom, just because his minutes have been increasing. I don't think we're going to see it the 40 that he did the other night, but realistically, we should be seeing the usage go elsewhere. And the lack of bigs for Atlanta, I think, is going to be more prevalent than another 20 minutes from Enes. So that's the way I'm looking at it. If you want to be taking a bigger stand on him, I think that's certainly fine. I just don't expect the 40 minutes we saw the other night. I think that's obviously an outlier game against Joel Embiid, especially against a shorthanded Cavs team. We could certainly see Tatum and Brown kind of take care of things for the Celtics, and then it doesn't leave a whole lot of offensive usage for Freedom. So that's my kind of take on it. The center position tonight, in all reality, I think you should be trying to spend up for Jokic at the center position. I think that he is the clear top option on the entire slate, regardless of position. I think you should be making him a priority. Spending down at center, I think, is fine in certain circumstances, but really the best play is just to spend up for Jokic. I think going to Jokic, going to Jrue Holiday, and then one of Tatum or Paul George or both of them, or Tatum plus Chris Middleton is really, I want to say, a very viable roster construction path. And it doesn't seem like a lot because there's only 4,200 per player remaining. There's just so much value on tonight's slate that you can realistically get up to 3 or 4 of the top stars on tonight's slate, which really aren't that expensive. So if you want to be looking to, I'm going to say, a lot of the value potential that we have from Atlanta, some of the value that we have from Cleveland, this is actually realistic to have 3 players above 9,000, 3 or 4 players above 7 or so thousand. I think that this is certainly a viable path on tonight's slate. Kevin Huerter, 5,500. He's not super expensive, but we should be seeing plenty of minutes for him. What's going on? What's to look forward to? Bring Lance Stevenson in my lineup. Not sure if he's playing. That's what Sal on YouTube is asking. Yeah, that's something that we would need to get some clarification on overall. So Lance isn't even in the player pool as of now. If he gets updated, that would be good. Whether you're playing on FanDuel or other sites, that's something we need clarification on. Like, just because he's signed, is he actually going to be available? That would be something like, I don't have the information. I get that information at the same time as you. I would have some interest in him realistically if he will be active, if we get some type of clarity on that. DJ is asking, I know the game is canceled, but what can you tell me about Brandon Goodwin as a starter? If he's going to be there, I think it'd be fine if his minutes are going to be secure, but I mean, I'm not really, that's not like really something I'm focusing on because that game is done. Same on Ersan Ilyasova. Like, again, if he's going to be available in the player pool, set to play minutes, that's something I would consider. Ilyasova is obviously a veteran, has been in the league or in and out of the league for a number of times over the past few years. We had seen him be a consistent value play, especially when he was with Milwaukee, when we saw Giannis out of the lineup for those seasons. Like, Ilyasova is a player, if he would be, minimum salary, $3,500, $3,800, that's a player I would be considering as long as we knew he'd be available and he'd be in the rotation at least. So the top tier, again, very straightforward tonight. I think the value is where things can get a bit confusing because there's so many different value options. Where should you be going on a given slate or on this slate? Where should you be going? How many minutes are we going to be seeing from these players? I'm going to stick with the players that have been largely in the rotation, at least for some capacity for some of these teams. We know that they are calling up G League players and these emergency signings, the exemptions, but they're there because they have to be there. Like they need X amount of players. They need 8 players to be available. Just because they are signed, unless we have some type of clarity from the coach that they are going to be seeing 15 some odd minutes, you should not necessarily be taking a shot with them. Grayson Allen, 4,200, we know he's going to be playing. Going to some of those types of players is the ideal path. You want to be taking random shots with players that may or may not be in and out of the rotation. Peyton Pritchard should be seeing minutes. So you're working with a good core of players that have a high volume of minutes, along with players that we know have immense upside, like Tatum, Middleton, and Jokic, obviously all things considered, especially for Middleton with Antetokounmpo out of the lineup. So that is the kind of route that I'm going. I'm not just taking some random shot on G League players unless there's like concrete information about them. Sal's saying, I want some DeMarcus Cousins. Yeah, DeMarcus should be in for minutes because Wood is out and they're still without Brook Lopez, et cetera, et cetera. He doesn't play a whole lot of minutes, which is what is ultimately concerning to me, or is what has me a little bit hesitant about DeMarcus Cousins. Like he's never going to be out there for 35 plus minutes. They'll probably run things small. And we've seen Thanasis Antetokounmpo play at the center position. We've also seen Sandro Mamukelashvili see some minutes for them at the center position. The 42 minutes, again, I'm going to say is something that is a bit of an outlier. We should not be seeing 40 plus minutes from him again. I would say 18 to 25 is a bit more realistic splitting time with DeMarcus Cousins. Again, the issue I have with Cousins, I have with Onyeka Okongwu, what I have with Enes Freedom is that it just blocks you from playing Jokic, which is he's just the best player on tonight's slate. He's going to have the highest projection. He's going to have he has one of the best matchups, all those things. You should just be looking to play Jokic. Like, I get the idea of trying to be different, but it's Jokic. You should just play him and trying to just lock up center and go elsewhere from there. Sal was saying the same thing with Kevin Love. It's like, yeah, Kevin Love should be out there for a considerable amount of minutes if he's going to be playing. But obviously he popped up earlier today with this questionable tag. Like if he's out there, I want some shares of him at the power forward position, but knowing that his ceiling is going to be limited because he doesn't play a whole lot of minutes. I'd rather take a little bit of savings and come down to Dean Wade. Luke Cornett, in theory, could be a player that sees minutes if we see Kevin Love ruled out. But again, a player that I'm not looking to very, very heavily. DJ's asking, are you more in favor of playing John Collins or saving salary for a guy like Derrick Favors? John Collins is a player that I'm big on today. I already bet the over on his points, rebounds, assist prop, which was sitting at 33.5. I bet the over on that. I think that this is just a spot where two things. One, we know that Clint Capela's out. Two, Gallinari is out. And three, Onyeka Okongwu is on a minutes restriction. So there's a good possibility or a very high possibility that we're going to see times when John Collins is the acting center for Atlanta, right? And they're going to be running things small where he'll be out there alongside, let's just say it's Wright, Bogdanovich, Kevin Huerter, Cam Reddish, and then John Collins. Like it'll be that five. And the matchup against Orlando is a spot that we want to be attacking. Like I said, Orlando is super weak on defense against the center or the power forward position. So no matter where he's lining up, that's the spot I would be going. So it's John Collins, but it's John Collins at the power forward position tonight. If you want to be going to Favors, I think the same dual position eligibilities or just one. Yeah, so Favors is a fine option. We know that Mike Muscala is ruled out due to rest, but again, only putting him at the power forward position. Jeremiah Robinson-Earl should also be in there for some minutes. So you want to split some, they're going to be splitting minutes. So if you want to split up your shares, that's fine. But again, only for the power forward position. You don't want to be blocking center tonight. That's the main takeaway is like, for me, it's Jokic, it's Jrue Holiday, and then it's mixing in Paul George, Tatum, Middleton. Like those are my two cores of Holiday and Jokic, and then three of the other top stars, or two of the other three top stars on tonight's slate. SGA, I think, is also going to be in the mix just because DFS players have so much salary available that getting up to him or Haliburton is obviously very easy. So that's where I go. Yes, Sal is saying Lou Will is out. So Lou Will is out. Trae Young is out. It's going to be a lot of Delon Wright for Atlanta. We should also be seeing like Jalen Johnson. They just called up. They could, in theory, put him out there at the shooting guard position, depending on how they run their lineup. Like that's not something I'm anticipating like a whole lot of minutes for him. They would have to have some other player like ruled out between now and tip for me to consider it. Like a lot of these G League players, like Hassani Gravett, played some big minutes the other few days for the Magic just because they're so shorthanded. But again, if Cole Anthony is going to be healthy and starting, this is not a player that I'm necessarily going to be considering. Like, again, you'd have to take some extreme circumstance with all of these players or a number of them ruled out for me to considering some of these secondary G League call-ups. So that's really like the main takeaway for tonight's slate. You want to be sticking with the players that already have established roles. Just because a player is recently signed doesn't mean that he's going to be out there for 30 minutes. Some of these players are signed because they have to have the minimum. These sorts of situations you want to be paying attention to. So I would start with Jokic. I would start with Holiday. You want to go to Haliburton. You want to go to SGA. You want to go to Middleton, Jaylen Brown, Paul George, Tatum, John Collins. Like these are the players I'd be mixing in alongside Jokic and Holiday. Like this is really where like the core of my lineup build is going to be. These players, John Collins, Tatum, 4,300 remaining. There's a ton of value at the guard positions tonight. Like that's where we should see a lot of like popular lineup combinations. Forward position, the value here I think is fine. Yedda Osman, not super cheap. He could obviously be in for plenty of minutes, especially if we see Kevin Love ruled out. That's something I would keep my eye on. Like Thanasis Antetokounmpo should be in for a good amount of minutes tonight. Let's see, do we have him projected high? I mean, 17 to 20 minutes is realistically where we should be seeing him on tonight's slate. I will say the game that I have probably more interest in than any is probably LA Sacramento. The 4.5 point spread is obviously nice, but we also have two teams in the top 14 of the league when it comes to offensive pace. The Clippers here playing a little bit pace up. Then for the Sacramento side, we should just be seeing their main guys all playing 30 plus minutes, if not 35 plus minutes, especially for Buddy Hield, Haliburton, Harrison Barnes. That's what we should really be seeing. Heavy minutes for them. Rashawn Holmes is still listed as questionable. He's still dealing with his eye injury. So if he is not going to be in the starting lineup, then it should be Tristan Thompson. So Haliburton, Hield, I have to say, Buddy Hield is still very, very affordable for Sacramento. He's only $5,800, and he's playing heavy minutes for them because they have so many players ruled out. So, and with his three-point ability, taking 5, 6, 8, 9 threes per game, this is always a player I look to for some scoring upside that can exceed value very, very quickly. I know some people could be looking to Justice Winslow or Terrence Mann. I think these are all fine options on tonight's slate. I don't have like a super strong take on any of them. Getting up to the top stars is, again, going to be my priority. You want to get somebody Hield into your lineup, you're going to have to take some real minimum salary players. But again, I think it's still doable overall on tonight's slate. I also took, let's see, the over on Eric Gordon. His threes prop was 2.5, I want to say it was. Got it earlier in the day, so hopefully it hasn't changed too much. 2.5 made threes for him. I think it was at plus 138 earlier in the day, plus 140. Going up against Milwaukee, they're allowing the third most made three-pointers from their opponents per game. So plus money for Eric Gordon, who's going to be out there for a good amount of minutes. He's taking a consistent amount of threes on a nightly basis. We'd like to see him back to that 6, 7, 8 range compared to 4. Obviously, just giving him a better chance to reach that. But the plus money on over 2.5 is a spot that I already took for Eric Gordon. And then Gordon, Collins, and forget the other one that I took. I have to double check that. Sal's asking Cavs and Orlando money line. Cavs and Orlando money line. Let's take a look at that. So I said this morning on the podcast on the Daily ISO that I liked Orlando. I think it was plus 8 or plus 8.5 at that point. just because Atlanta's so shorthanded. Like Orlando could cover and still lose this game. That's ultimately I wouldn't care. For Orlando at +8, I think is where I got them. The Cavs, I don't have a ton of interest in on the money line. The Magic is a spot that I would consider going on the money line. We just want confirmation that Cole Anthony will in fact play because he is listed as questionable. Let's give this a quick refresh just because the injury situation is always changing. So just an update on the Clippers players available is always good to see. So I would say Orlando ahead of the Cavs. I know the Cavs have been this like covering machine as of late. They're covering like 12 straight games they've covered, and it's like 15 out of their last 18 or something like that. They've been covering and winning a lot of games, but shorthanded now. No Evan Mobley, no Jared Allen, potentially no Kevin Love. That could mean a big game for Darius Garland, a player that's really stepped up, especially after Colin Sexton went out. What's his line at? 33.5, only -106 for Garland. Let's see how, I know he's been obviously doing consistent lately, but 33.5, 36.5, 33.5 for Garland. Like that's a spot he could get to tonight. That's a realistic spot. Garland at -106 is a spot. Thoughts on Armoni Brooks, Pat Connaughton, Josh Christopher, Delon Wright, and Buddy Hield. So big fan of Buddy Hield, as I already spoke about. Armoni Brooks for Houston is a player that I've written about a number of times over the past few weeks. And I'll be on board with him tonight. I know he's already in my player pool. Some of the first lineup runs I did through the optimizer. He's in there just because the minutes are going to be strong for him. Like it's a pretty solid matchup against Milwaukee. Like I said, they're allowing a lot of threes this year. They're also playing very fast. So Milwaukee and Houston both in the top 10 of the league when it comes to offensive pace. Armoni Brooks is, yes, going to be involved for me because Jalen Green and Kevin Porter are both still out. Pat Connaughton, I think, is a fine option. The minutes should obviously be there for him and Grayson Allen. Pat Connaughton doesn't necessarily move the needle for me a whole lot tonight. I prefer Grayson Allen over Pat Connaughton simply due to the salary. That's all it comes down to. Grayson Allen, 4,200 compared to Connaughton at 57. So I think, again, Pat Connaughton should be playing 28, 35, somewhere in there when it comes to minutes. I just prefer Grayson Allen simply due to the salary. Josh Christopher, I think, is okay. I would prefer going to Gordon and Armoni Brooks in that lineup. Obviously, Christian Wood is obviously not the same question because Wood is much more expensive, plays a different position, but Delon Wright. So of that group, if I have to rank this group, Buddy Hield, I think is number one just because he's going to be playing 35-plus minutes, takes a ton of three-pointers. I would say Hield, Wright, Brooks, Connaughton, Christopher in that order is the way I would be targeting them. Just based on everything, their salaries, their minutes, what their usage and their potential production should look like. That's really where I'd be going. Definitely Buddy Hield, number one. I still think he's like very affordable at $5,800 for playing 36, 39 minutes in some of these recent games. Again, that's the spot I'd be looking number one overall. So as we get more injury information, what I'll say is like be ready to pivot like based on anything. If some player gets ruled out, like know who your core guys are and then know where you're going to be pivoting off of them. So by chance, this is just pure speculation. Like if you were going to be heavy on Chris Middleton and all of a sudden he gets ruled out, whether it's the knee injury or it's the health and safety protocols, be ready to shift your shares to Jaylen Brown, like someone that's in the same, salary tier. If you were big on, I don't know, Garrison Matthews or Dean Wade, like be ready to shift them to another player. So like have your pivots ready. Are Georgia Man your favorite Clippers tonight? Well, Paul George is always going to be my favorite Clipper just based on his usage. He's back in the lineup. I mentioned him on the podcast this morning. He only played 30 minutes in his first game back. Obviously, we have to take that with a bit of a grain of salt because it was his first game back. Hopefully, we see his 30 minutes go to 35-ish tonight. Obviously, this is phenomenal point per minute production. If Sacramento is able to keep this game close, which is it's expected to be, I think the 4.5 is a good indication that we should be seeing more minutes from Paul George. So Paul George is always going to be my number one option when it comes to the Clippers. Man, based on his salary, you could make an argument he would be number two. Yeah, I think we can make the argument that Man is number 2 for me, especially with Reggie Jackson out. Eric Bledsoe, it's fine. That is it's fine. I would actually, definitely take Man ahead of Bledsoe. Any Houston or OKC prop bets you like tonight? Yeah, I said I already took the Eric Gordon over 2.5 made threes, which is sitting at plus 136, right? Plus 132 for Eric Gordon. I already took that earlier in the day. OKC props. Let's take a look at those. I haven't taken any of those today. I took Gordon, Collins, and I took one other. I can't remember. You looking for 3-point props, or let's just look at some of these lines overall. Josh Giddey, 26.5, minus 120 is a little bit. Monty Morris, 20.5 isn't bad. Okay, I think these are all pretty spot on. I don't like the juice on Josh Giddey there. Threes, SGA, 2.5. He's not taking a ton. 6.5, minus 102 for Josh Giddey. Is that a spot that if they keep this game close, that's well within his range of outcomes to have over 6.5 assists for Josh Giddey at minus 102. So that's certainly one that is probably at the top of my list right now at first glance. None of these are none of these are jumping off the page significantly for me as of right now. But Josh Giddey would be number 1. Over 6.5 at minus 102 would be the spot to look. 13.5 points for Josh Giddey. Let's see. Because some of these are obviously 13.5 is not bad. With his volume of shots he's been getting up lately, that's sitting at plus 102. So 2 Josh Giddey props, plus 102 and minus 102, over 13.5 points, over 6.5 assists. Those are 2 spots I would look for OKC. Like I said, over 2.5 made threes for Eric Bledsoe. Garrison Matthews could also be in the conversation for over threes for the Rockets, just because we know he does take a lot at times. Let's see what his line is at. Plus 110 for Garrison Matthews for over 2.5. Like I said, Milwaukee, 3rd most 3-pointers allowed per game to their opponents, sitting at 14.2. We want to look to Garrison Matthews. He's taking, 4, 9, 7, 6, 8, 11. He's taking a lot of threes, and it's only at 2.5, and it's plus money. Garrison Matthews also on the table. Just joined. How do you feel about Jokic? Jokic is number 1 option on tonight's slate. So between Jerry on Facebook and Michael on YouTube, they're both asking about Jokic. Michael is saying only playing 1 GPP lineup. I feel like I have to roster Jokic. And Jerry's asking, how do I feel about Jokic? Yes. So I said at the top, Jokic is just the best player on tonight's slate. And this is because, someone was asking about, some of the value options at center, which I think are fine, whether it be DeMarcus Cousins, whether it be Tristan Thompson, he should be in for minutes, Freedom, or Onyeka Okongwu. Those are all fine options if it were a little bit of a different slate, but Jokic is just the best option on tonight's slate. So I've said it before, just roll with Jokic tonight. Jokic and Holiday, as you can see here, are the 2 players I'm locking into a lot of lineups, right? And then after them, it's going to Tatum, Paul George, Chris Middleton, Haliburton, Brown, those sets of players that are just a little bit less expensive, but we can get to them because there's so much value. So to answer your question, yes, go with Jokic. He's realistically, he's the only player that could conceivably get to 70 points and it not be a surprise. Tatum's great and all, and I love rostering Tatum, but he's not a player that gets up to 70 points. 55 points is 55 points is a big game for Tatum, or 60 points, but Jokic going for 60, 65, 70, really isn't that crazy. And he's basically the only player on the slate that can do it. So I'm not fading Jokic tonight. I'm rostering him in as many spots as I possibly can. Again, there's some spots that I'll look to just differentiate a little bit, but he's going to be in the overwhelming majority of my lineups tonight. And my nuts for taking Cleveland or Orlando on the money line at Grim on YouTube's asking. Someone asked that already, or a variation of that. Like I said, I would be much more comfortable with going to the Magic at plus 260, just because Atlanta is very shorthanded, and especially if Cole Anthony gets ruled in, he's listed as questionable. Let's just give this a quick update. So nothing new on that. Like going to Orlando plus 260 makes sense. I said this morning that, I like him at plus 8, but I have much more interest in going to Orlando on the money line compared to Cleveland. Like Boston is fully healthy or essentially fully healthy. All right. And Cleveland's shorthanded, missing Mobley and Jared Allen, and could be missing Kevin Love, and they're missing who else? Just flip to the Cavs, so we adjust the Cavs. Mobley, Allen already out. Kevin Love could be out. Okoro is out. Like, they're shorthanded. I don't have any interest in them on the money line. Orlando would be the spot that I'm going. Jerry's asking, do you think Smart and Garland will hit their value tonight at price for GPPs? So I have more interest in Garland than I do for Marcus Smart. And I think Garland is just because they're going to be so shorthanded. Like their usage really should be concentrated around him and Ricky Rubio, right? Like no Jared Allen, no Mobley, especially if Kevin Love is ruled out. See if I can do this real quick. Allen is out. Mobley is out. We have to account for Colin Sexton. Let's just say Kevin Love. I don't think too many of the role players matter that much. Like Garland, high usage rate, nearly 30%. If we adjust for every single player, maybe it'd boost him over 1 FanDuel point per minute. But he's been playing well as of late. I like Garland more than Marcus Smart in that specific circumstance. Michael Starr on YouTube is asking, Robin Lopez could give me 35 or so at 5K, but Jokic could go for 70 and the lowest, 35 cents. I agree with that. Like there are fine options at center in the mid-tier, whether it be Robin Lopez, whether it be like Robert Williams. Like there's nothing wrong with Robert Williams tonight, especially going up against a depleted Cavs team. But Williams isn't going to go for like a massive ceiling game that's going to offset the cost of, or like the opportunity cost of not rostering Jokic. Also, if you're not rostering Jokic, there's really not a whole lot of stars that you can pay up for. So it just comes down to that. Like the Time Lord should eat tonight. And I totally agree with Sal. Like very depleted front line for the Cavs. And I'm not doubting that. I'm not doubting the Celtics' ability to win this game or Robert Williams to reach and exceed value. It's just the opportunity cost of not rostering Jokic when you're not like transferring that salary to someone else that can give you equivalent upside, right? Like Jrue Holiday is great tonight, and I love Jrue Holiday, and I told you I'm going to be rostering him a ton, but there's no like other player that's going to have as high of a projection as Jokic. That's what it comes down to. Jerry's asking, what are some of the guys we should want to target dealing with all the COVID protocol injuries? So Delon Wright for Atlanta, he's going to be in for just a ton of minutes because they are so shorthanded at the guard position. That's very clear. We could be seeing extra minutes for Lauri Markkanen, Dean Wade, because they are shorthanded to begin with, especially if we see Kevin Love ruled out. That's not going to be a surprise. That game's canceled for Sacramento. I still think Buddy Hield is very affordable at $5,800. Going to be in like 35 plus minutes because they are still shorthanded, like 39 minutes in each of the past 2 games. He's taken a ton of shots, ton of 3-pointers. That's always good. Grim's asking, do you like SGA or Jrue Holiday tonight? If I have to choose between them, I'm taking Jrue Holiday with Noah Antetokounmpo going up against the Houston Rockets. Obviously not worried about that matchup like at all. That's why like Jrue Holiday and Jokic, again, where I'm starting the overwhelming majority of my lineups tonight. After those two, it's mixing in shares of Tatum, Paul George, John Collins, Haliburton, and some SGA. But if I have to choose between Holiday and SGA, it's going to be Holiday literally like 9.5 times out of 10. Just because his usage has been phenomenal with Antetokounmpo off the court. Now, yes, some of those games were without Chris Middleton, but we still should be seeing him absolutely feast tonight against the weak Rockets defense. You love Haliburton and Hield mix up tonight. I like them both. I'm going to be on board with both of them. Haliburton, because he's been unbelievably consistent running the offense for the Kings with no De'Aaron Fox. And then Buddy Hield, I think his salary is too cheap and he takes plenty of shots. Michael Starr is asking, do you like Josh Giddey tonight? I do. I just went over some of his player props. I think that's a spot I'd be looking as well for his assists and his points. All right, so that does it for today's Q&A. I'll be back next week at 4 p.m. right here on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter pages, taking your questions about the night's NBA DFS slate. You can follow me on Twitter at DFS_Tom. Until next time, good luck in your contests.